So good day, Sir Mark Anthony Undangan. I am Marijan Valleta Katubig, and for today's video presentation, I'll be answering the midterm exam, which is all about pattern. So what is pattern? A pattern is a repetitive series or sequence. In math, patterns are repeating sequences that follow a rule, and a rule is a predetermined method of calculating or solving a problem. So there are four most classification of most common pattern in nature. Namely, first is the symmetry, second is the fractal, third is the spiral, and lastly is the tessellation. So let's first tackle or describe the symmetry first. So symmetry. A symmetry is a pattern that shows reflections of images. The symmetrical pattern is considerably more important because it allows for more precise predictions. So symmetry is a pattern's predictable and perfect regularity. When other parts of pattern are modified, symmetric patterns produce certain aspects of the pattern identically. So there are two types of symmetry. The first one is the radial symmetry, and the second one is the bilateral symmetry. So radial symmetry formed around a central axis. So the example of this are the following. First is the actinomorphic flower. Flower petals tend to extend from a central axis into a radial pattern. The second one is the coral. The animals in these groups are aquatic, have stinging cells in their tissues, and as you can see in the picture, they have a radial symmetrical body design. The third one is the starfish. So key functions are coordinated in the center of their bodies, then passed down in the arms. The fourth one is the fruits. Fruits frequently have a radial symmetry. Think of an orange or apple that has been cut into edges. The seeds within the fruits are distributed in a radial pattern. And the last one is the umbrella. So on the other hand, bilateral symmetry is a concept that two opposite sides have identical features. So the examples of this are first, butterfly. So butterfly is the perfect example of bilateral symmetry. Its wings is identical to each other. The second one is the fly. If you divide fly into two, you can still see the identical features they have. And the third one is the spiders. The fourth one is the common worms, because the right side of their bodies is a mirror of the left sides. So one type of worm is the flatworm. Lastly is the dogs. If you divide dogs into two, it still have the same pattern. You can still see the identical features they have. So the next is the fractal. A fractal is a kind of a pattern that we observe often in nature and even in art. Fractal is a pattern which repeats at progressively smaller sizes and angles. So a fractal pattern is one that never ends. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that look the same at different scales. So the repetition that occurs in a fractal is called self-similarity. So the example of this is first the makahiya. The one that we stamp, they will get close. The next one is the clouds. The third one is the bubbles. As you can see in the image, there may be several giant bubbles interspersed with tiny bubbles in the spaces, which have smaller bubbles in their gaps, and so on. So that makes them fractals. The fourth one is the branches of trees. Branches trees considered as fractal because if you start from the trunk and move up, it breaks into several parts. So that makes them fractal also. And the last one is the fern. Fern also termed fractal since enlarging a little area of the figure reproduces the original figure. Or if you will, the part contains the whole. So the third one is the spiral. So what is spiral? Spiral is a pattern that moves around at a center point and continuously widening. It is a curved pattern that focuses on a center point and a series of circular shapes that revolve around it. So the example of this are the following. First is the malipit, or what we call labud. As you can see in the picture, it has a curved pattern. Next one is the rose. As you can see in the picture, it is a curved pattern from the central point and continuously widening. The third one is the horns in various animals. It is also considered fractal also. The one has a curved horns, for instance, this goat in the picture. And lastly is the spring toy or spring on notebook. So the last classification of common patterns in nature is the tessellation. So what is tessellation? A tessellation is a form of tiling that repeats forever in all directions. So a pattern of geometric shapes that repeats figures closely fitting together and fills a two-dimensional space with no gaps or overlaps. So there are three types of tessellation. So namely, first, triangle packing, the second one is square packing, and lastly is the hexagonal packing. So what are the examples of this tessellation? So first is the floor tiles. They are composed of repeating patterns of the same shape without any overlaps or gaps. The second one is the honeycomb. Honey structure is a natural and efficient use of space. The third one is the turtle shells. The fourth one is the pineapple fruit. And lastly is the fish scales. So that will be all, sir. Thank you and God bless.